Hello, welcome to Central Florida Fish Outlaws. This is a website we started to talk about fishing Central Florida lakes, and in this segment we're going to be talking about fishing for crappie. Crappie is a species of fish that a lot of people go for between usually December, January, February, March, sometimes up into April. We're coming up on the back end of the crappie fishing, but this upcoming trip we have a cold front. The fish like the cold, so we're hoping to get our limits this trip out. And what we're going to be discussing on this video is how we plan on catching these fish and how it can help make your trip a successful one if you follow these simple tips. It's not hard, it's pretty simple. Just follow these guidelines and hope you have a successful trip like we did. For starters, I'm going to talk about the equipment. The equipment we like to use are smaller rods similar to this one. This is a small, not quite ultralight, but smaller reel as opposed to a bass, which is a medium to large, large action. You can get these anywhere. Walmart is a good place. They're fairly inexpensive. They range anywhere from 10 bucks, probably on up to 40, 50, 60 bucks, but you don't have to get too expensive with it because the crappie, they don't need expensive equipment to catch them because they're fairly simple, not very heavy, large action fish that are going to be breaking your equipment and running with a bunch of drags. So you don't have to get the expensive equipment. If you like it, great. Otherwise, anything will work on these fish. Line size, I typically go with a braid. Braid is, for me, because it's thinner, I can get a longer cast, and we'll get into that, how that's going to be beneficial to you. But you don't have to have a braid either. It's a little bit more of an expensive line. You can go with a monofilament, fluorocarbon, whatever your preference is. You pick it. The only thing I would say is you want to keep it to about 6-pound test or less. Otherwise, if it gets too heavy, you're not going to get a good cast. You're not going to get a nice smooth reel movement out of it. It's just going to take away from the experience of crappie fishing because they're more of a pan fish. So even though they do get pretty big, they're not really large 10-pound fish like bass get. So no need to get extravagant or go up to a heavy line. 6-pound test or less will be great. The rod here is just a simple, small action, nothing too long, about a 5-foot, 5.5-foot rod. This one is a St. Croix, so they're a little bit more expensive. Again, you don't need that. You can buy a rod at Walmart, any brand will do. Just make sure the rod that you get matches the reel that you get. You don't want to get a smaller reel with a heavy rod. It's going to take away from the action of that reel. It's not going to feel natural. You want to match that rod and reel up the best that you can. So right here we got a perfect example of that. It's a light rod, not very long, got a lot of nice play to it. Nice small reel loaded with braid. What we like to use, or the setup that I'm going to go with here is, and back this up a notch, I'm going to take this braid. If you're going to use braid, you don't want to tie anything directly to the braid, meaning your hook or your lure. Typically, the reason why that is A, because the braid is a little bit more slippery. It has a slick feel to it. So if you tie it on there, there's a good chance if something gets a good heavy pull on it, it's going to slip that knot right out and you're going to lose it. I've seen it happen. It might not on the smaller tackle, but I've seen it happen. So what I do is I'll take about a 3-foot section of fluorocarbon, match this up with your line test for your braid. So if you're going to use a 10-pound, 8-pound braid, use anywhere from about a 6-pound to anywhere between 6 and 8-pound fluorocarbon. I think it's an 8-pound test braid here, so I'm going to use a 6-pound fluorocarbon because the diameter is going to match up better. It's going to, when you splice it in, it's going to hold better. We're going to be using minnows for bait. That's the bait of choice for crappie. That's pretty universal. You can do that in any area lake. It doesn't matter where you go. Minnows are going to be your best live bait for crappie. Other than that, you can use lures. We like to use jigs, somewhat like these jig heads, the Road Runners, right here. These I like to get because it's the jig head with a spinner. That silver spinner is what usually will attract those fish more. Why these are preferred by most crappie fishermen when they're using jigs. And then if you get the ones where it's just the head, the jig head and the hook, you can use any color body. You can switch it up. Most people prefer to use a chartreuse color. That's a yellowish green color jig, if you will, with maybe a different color body. A black body with a chartreuse tail, that's a big popular one that I've noticed. So that's what we're going to be doing. We'll typically take one pole, similar to the one I just showed you, same setup, a little bit bigger of a reel. And I went with this one so that I can kind of go for whatever. If I switch it up and crappie aren't biting, I can take the same reel and go for bass. It's a little bit more of a medium action reel. But in the beginning, when we first start out, I'll use this one with a jig head and fish a jig. And I'll take the second one and use it for live bait. And typically what this will do is you cover more water with it. Whatever species of fish you're fishing for, the main thing that we've learned, and we're fairly new at this, so we hope that we can help you out by our adventures. We'll take the guesswork out of it, so you don't have to guess. We'll go out and we're going to try all these different tips and techniques that we find, and we're going to provide that information to you, and hopefully that'll help you out. We'll take the heat. We'll take the days that we don't catch anything. We'll let you know what worked, what didn't work. The days that we caught plenty of fish and what we used. So we hope that information is helpful for you. But what we've found so far in our adventures is no matter what we fish for, the more water you cover, the more success you're going to have. For our last trip for crappie, we started off in a particular area, if you will, that produced maybe 3 or 4 fish. So as the day went on, we noticed that a lot of boats were heading in where we just wanted to stay out fishing. So what we decided to do was, after probably 3 hours and maybe 3-4 fish, so we're averaging a fish an hour, we're just going to troll the lake. We drop the trolling motor, we start moving the lake. After the next hour, I'd say we caught probably 5 fish. So we probably almost doubled our output from the first 3 hours in 1 hour alone. So right away we knew that was going to be our secret for the rest of the day. Just stay on the move, stay on the move. The more lake you cover, the more chances of you catching some fish. We ended the day with probably 25 crappies. So the last half of the day we tripled our output from what we caught the first hour or 3 hours. And so now we're hoping that this next trip we're just going to start off and we're going to troll the lake from the start to finish and just cover as much water as we can. The lake that we like to fish for crappie is Lake Woodruff, and we'll be covering that in this next segment. And what we find with this lake is so good with crappie is it's very close to De Leon Springs, which is a natural spring that feeds directly into this lake. And the natural spring waters here in Florida, for those of you that are from here know, is typically colder. It stays somewhere around 70, 72 degrees year round. So this water is going to feed right into this lake and keep that lake water cooler. That's why we believe the crappie in this lake are so much more plentiful. We've went out on the lake in the middle of crappie season in January and seen up to 40 boats. We don't know what we expect to see this next trip. Here we are, it's going to be March 3rd, and we hope it's plenty out there because it's going to tell us the fish are there. And if we're not very successful, we're going to let you know that too. We're not here to tell you any lies about fishing. Our business isn't about taking you out and making you pay $150 to go out and catch a fish that you can do for a lot less the money. So in our next segment, we hope to see you, and we hope you see us catching plenty of fish. And thanks for joining us here today.